I am live on the chat with Kris Wolfe. How are you, Kris?
Good. How are you doing, Roberto?
Pretty good, thank you. I invited Kris so we could talk about depression. Recently, it's been all over the headlines that more people are struggling with depression due to the lockdowns, the COVID-19 lockdowns, and some people are not handling social distancing really well. According to one of the last articles that was published, more than 42% of people who were surveyed reported that they were actually feeling some symptoms of depression or anxiety because of social distancing and just being locked down at home. So I wanted to talk to Kris because Kris has dealt with depression, deals with depression, and Kris is going to tell us what depression is. So let's start with that, Kris. Let us tell us what depression is.
Well, absolutely. I think everybody experiences depression at some point. So there's just, when sometimes when they talk about depression on a national scale, the statistics are pretty, that about 30% of both males and females experience depression, and you saw about a 11-12% increase over this past year. So,
Okay.
there's and I'm not an expert on depression by any means, but I definitely kind of worked in this field a little bit when I actually launched and sold some antidepressants. I'm sure you've heard of like Prozac and some of those drugs. I
Yes.
worked for that company. But you have depression, which is just kind of like we all feel those feelings of sometimes like anxiety, which would be a comorbidity of it, or you usually would have accompanying anxiety, but just obviously depression, feeling down. We all feel down at some point. I think when it
Yeah.
becomes like an issue where you might want to seek, and talk to a medical professional is when you actually would hit what would be called major depressive disorder, which is really you're looking at weeks and weeks of feeling depressed and down no matter what you do. So
Right.
that's and it's very prevalent as you can see. 42%, almost half of the U.S. is struggling with depression
Right.
now.
Right now. Yeah, and that's, and some people too may not be actually disclosing that, they might be feeling depressed or be anxious. Because some people just feel shame and be like, well, I don't want to be perceived as being weak, so no, I'm not depressed, or, they play, they're like tough or whatever. But so tell
Right,
us,
right.
when did you first experience, how old were you when you experienced depression at first?
I mean, I think like for me, I've definitely just gone through many ups and downs in my life. I think throughout my life, I think at this point in my life, I've been married almost 8 years, and we have two children, and I've been so busy. I'm not really experiencing depression currently, but definitely, I think that there's been some times in my life where I experienced hopelessness. I think that's a big impetus when you're talking about how I wrote some books. I wrote 10 Ways to Win a Girl's Heart. And I
Yeah.
think, when it comes to relationships and being single, we all feel a sense of hopelessness there. And I came from Missouri. I came from the Midwest. And in the Midwest, if you're not married by the time you're in your mid 20s, then people start like wondering what's wrong with you. And
What's
so
wrong?
and so I think by the time I hit my 30s, I was like, oh gosh, I'm way past that age. I've definitely felt a lot of hopelessness in that arena, and I didn't, I just kind of had at some point, I got married. Let's see, I think I got married, when I was 36, but but I think that I definitely hit like a point where I was like, I'm not going to get married anymore. I'm past my 30s, so I guess I should just be stuck and ready for this single life.
So getting married actually helped you. I think so you wanted to get married and maybe that's why were you feeling lonely or were you just feeling that nobody wanted you?
Because getting married will not solve any of your depression issues at all. And I still go through some ups and downs. I'm just saying that probably the
Yeah.
consistency with which I experienced depression in the past is not necessarily there. And you brought up something really good, Roberto, before, where you talked about how people aren't really willing and open to talk about it. And when you looked at how they classically used to identify depression, it used to show that women would experience depression more than men. But
Mm,
recently, they've been adding some different criteria in, because sometimes when you're talking about shame, it doesn't matter if you feel shame or not. Like if you're depressed, it will manifest itself. Specifically in men, depression can even manifest as just like back pain, or neck pain or shoulder pain. And really, once you
right.
get in to talk to a medical professional about it, they would have the tools to help identify that. But I think the statistics have risen a lot, because and actually have equalized among men and women, because even though men might not outright say, "Hey, I'm depressed, I need some help," it will still manifest in physical forms.
Yeah, yeah. So I had seen, as I told you before, this video on YouTube where you had shared, your story when you were about 16, when you felt very lonely, you were struggling with depression. Can you share your story with us again?
Absolutely. And I think that would have been maybe a time in my life where I probably could have benefited from being on some form of treatment. I know some people
Hmm.
sometimes have some mixed thoughts when it comes to taking antidepressants, but I think the good thing about when you had these antidepressants like Prozac come out is that it really destigmatized having depression. And specifically for men, we always feel like weak, if we have to admit that we're depressed. So when I was a
Hmm.
sophomore in high school, I experienced a lot of depression, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had found out at that age that I had been sexually molested, or I've not found out. I should say that it really started to occur to me that I had been sexually molested when I was in the fourth grade. That's not to say that I didn't understand that beforehand. It's just that probably the significance really started bearing on me, and just being socially isolated. We were talking
Hmm.
about some of the statistics that people are socially isolated right now. I think I
Yeah.
started to distance myself when I was in my sophomore year. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anyone to talk to at all. And so it was at that point that I started to experience depression, and even had, some suicidal thoughts, and even really strongly considered it one night.
Yeah. So who did you approach first? Who did you say, hey, I need help. I'm depressed. I've had some suicidal thoughts. Who was the first person you reached out to?
To be honest, I didn't have anyone. I didn't have anyone to share that with. So
Your mother? You didn't talk to your mother or
I didn't talk to my parents about it. I didn't talk to my parents about it until years and years later. But honestly, quite
okay.
honestly, the only two things that I had in my life at that point, I definitely had. I had a dog named Kingston. He was a Labrador Retriever, and I'd raised him, and that was probably the only thing that I could hold on to in my life at that point. But
Yeah.
but really, it was in the moment that I really was going to commit, really strongly committed, thinking about committing suicide, that I really just probably like spoke to God in a very real way at that moment. And so for me, the person that I talked to, I think the person that actually really helped me in that moment was God. I'm gonna take these
Was it?
glasses
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. I know you're a Christian because, like I said, I follow you on Instagram and I read some of your posts sometimes. So do you have a Bible verse that is your favorite, one that you go to when you're feeling really down at your lowest point?
I think the thing that stuck out to me is that and I at that I didn't really become a Christian per se by that moment when I was 16. But I really heard God say to me in that moment, like, don't end your life right now. And he goes,
Mm,
I have plans for you. I have plans for a hope and a future. And then, to come to find out later that that's a verse from Jeremiah 28. So
oh
um
wow.
so yeah, I mean, I don't want to like I feel like sometimes like even saying that word Christian can be, it, you know, it can even be like a negative word in in this day and age. But I just want to point out that I'm a believer in Christ. I'm a believer in Jesus, and all of it really stems back to that moment. when I was
Mhm.
about to end my life, and I really felt like Jesus intervened in my life. And so, I believe in Jesus, but I don't necessarily always follow the herd of what you might think the whole Christian politics and all that might be. Even
Yeah.
I
So
think there's
is
a
someone, go ahead.
all that say is I think there's a very real person. There's a very real Jesus. Like if you can get past the layers of what people think Christianity is today.
Yeah, that's true. So there is a 16-year-old Chris out there right now that's going through actually more than one, I'm sure, right in the thousands, perhaps with so many people, suffering depression right now. What advice would you have for someone that's listening, that's a teenager, that is looking at their phone and social media and they see this perfect world, being displayed out there that, a lot of times it's not really what's going on in people's real lives.
Yeah,
But what advice would you have for someone who's a teenager that's really depressed right now and perhaps even considering suicide?
yeah. Um, Man, I just kind of got it just hit me a little bit just thinking about that because I know that there are many. I would just say,
Yeah.
maybe you might not have anyone. Maybe there's no one you really can turn to, and you were in my shoes too. I would just say, you know, just spend some time, like just take a little time and just pray. I mean, I know it sounds so ridiculous, and I don't mean to like just pray in a traditional sense. I mean, like I remember for me, I was like my family was gone. It was actually on New Year's Eve, and my parents were gone, my sister was gone, and it was really in that moment that I felt the most. I didn't have anybody in my life, so I just remember I had a knife out. I ended up laying down on the kitchen floor, and I was actually just screaming at God. I was so upset at God in that
Mm,
moment. Like, why am I so lonely? Why did I have to go through the things that I went through in my life? And it was really and then I was just bawling crying. I think it was in that moment that I felt like a reassurance come over me where I really maybe I didn't like hear an audible voice of God, but I really felt that whole idea that the presence of I do have some hope for you. Don't end your life now. There is hope. I will bring friends
yeah.
into your life. And he did, things started to really turn around and shape from there. So I would say if you have no one else to talk to, just pray. And and then, there's also some great hotlines that are out there, some suicide prevention hotlines. I didn't know about that stuff when I was 16.
Yeah.
But if you know about that now and you're feeling that way, then pray. There it is. There's a suicide prevention hotline. Call that number. I think just to share with, even just to audibly say it and share it can make a big difference in your life.
Yes, absolutely. So is that the only time that you contemplated suicide, or did you contemplate suicide more than once?
I mean, I think there's always kind of like in the background, there's thoughts like, am I even necessary in this world? Do I even need to exist? But I think that was
Hmm.
the 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 one and only time that I was so pronounced that I was, looking to take action on it. I remember specifically, I had already planned my course of action. I had, I thought like that the peaceful way to go would really just to be to go into the garage. I was looking frantically. For some reason, my mom always kept her car keys over the bread box in our house in this basket. And I remember they weren't in there. And I was so surprised because I know that they didn't take my mom's car that night. And I went upstairs and I was looking frantically through her room to find the car keys, and I couldn't find them. So that was the only time that I had really like plotted and said, this is what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah. Uh, well, now how has I know you love working out and everything. What time did you at what age did you start working out, and how did that help you with your depression exercise? What role did it play in recovering from your depression?
Yeah, I definitely think that exercising, staying in good shape, um, can be of benefit. And I was always involved, and I was involved in track and field when I was in high school. I probably didn't start working out with weights like I do now until I was about 18. My best friend, who was really huge, he came over to my dorm room and he started forcing me to go to the gym with him. I hated it, but he came every day consistently, and I was like, I'm going to study, and he's like, no, you're going to come work out. So, he kind of showed me the ropes, and a semester later, he ended up having to leave the university, and I just kept on at it. I just noticed, I noticed like a change of confidence in me, and that was really the impetus for me to continue to work out, and why I still work out to this day.
Yeah, of course. I was reading a quote from, I was reading, by the way, Kris has a blog. Let me hide this comment here. Um, Kris runs goodguyswag.com. He's also a author. You have two books, right, Kris?
I do, yeah. You can see there's the one 10 Ways to Win a Girl's Heart is available on Amazon and and other areas, places, but the other one, Black Tie, is one that I just kind of wrote as a companion piece to it. That's available on the website. Of course, I haven't really been like having two little kids. I probably haven't been as consistent on the website as I should, but thank you for the shout
Yes. Yeah, but I wanted to read this quote that you have on your blog on one of your articles that I thought it was really powerful. And it says, and it hit me that when everything is going great, I don't feel lonely. It's when things get stressful, when life becomes hard, I feel like I don't have anyone to talk to or process life with. And I think a lot of people right now can relate to that quote that you have on one of your articles. And by the way, the article is, I believe it's Lonely Leaders. So if you go to his website and want to read it, Kris wrote an article about leadership and how it can make people feel lonely. There's actually been some leaders that have committed suicide recently as well. A lot of stress, they feel lonely, tons of pressure. But what I wanted to ask you, Kris, is in your view, because you mentioned here that when things get stressful, what stresses you out? What gets you to that point of feeling stressed and then turning into depression?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to like think back at what point in my life I wrote that, but I've definitely experienced a number of things. I think the first thing that comes up to me is I remember, you know, here Kristen and we had a baby that was just beginning to crawl, and we ended up getting audited by the IRS, and then the
Oh
IRS
my God.
came back and said, "Oh, we're gonna go ahead and audit another year too." So I remember we're getting audited by the IRS. We have stacks of paper. Like I wish I could show you all like what the stacks of paper, but I mean like stacks of paper all over our living room. I remember we actually took all of the couches and all the furniture and formed a circle in the living room so her daughter could crawl around while we worked on all this stuff. So I remember we're getting audited, which is awful. And then I found out that I was getting laid off from my job. So I'm losing my job. And there was something else that was happening at that point, but it was just obviously a lot of stress that was happening, and yeah, I think especially when you're a leader, and you feel like you have to portray this image that you have it all together. It's very, very difficult to process things with sometimes.
Yeah. Well, Kris, thank you so much for spending some time talking with me about depression. As we said earlier, if you are contemplating or thinking of committing suicide, you feel lonely, there is a suicide helpline. If you don't have anybody to talk to, if you can, reach out to a close friend or a parent, a teacher. If you're in school, teachers are really good at listening, um, or a counselor at your school, and you can get some help. Kris, how can people find you on Twitter and on Instagram?
Oh gosh, I haven't been active on Twitter for a bit, but you can find me on Instagram. It's Kris Wolfe, KrisWolfe. Feel free to reach out to me, especially too if you need someone to talk to. Please do reach out to me. And yeah, like I said, if you are, especially if you're a young man, because suicide rates among men, by the way, are 4 times higher, and you're
Oh,
even
wow.
that. It doesn't matter too. If you are male or female, please do reach out to me, or reach out to someone. Call the suicide prevention line. I just think it's most important for young men to actually share, because I think that you know young men especially don't feel like they can share this with anyone, and that's why those rates are a lot higher. So no matter what, talk to someone, call that line, say a
Yes.
prayer, reach out to me, just do whatever it takes. Please, please, please. This world needs you.
Yes. And you can find me on social media as well, Instagram, Twitter, on YouTube at Live on the Chat. I am everywhere, TikTok, Live on the Chat as well. And if you want to support independent creators such as myself, there is my Venmo and Cash App account, which is also Live on the Chat. Thank you so much, Kris, for doing this today. You're very generous with your time. You live up to your good guy name, because I sent you a message on Instagram and you're like, anything I can do to help. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, he's such a nice guy. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It was great talking to you. We finally talked to you in person. How about that? This is what it took.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kris. I'll see you later. Have a good
All
one.
right. See you later.
Bye.